Hey everyone, I'm Tia with KEXP, and today I have the great honor of talking to Ijeoma Oluo and Gabriel Teodros. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Our listeners will, of course, be familiar with Gabriel, KEXP DJ, and prominent fixture in Seattle's hip-hop community. You just released What We Leave Behind, which is amazing.
Thank you.
And Ijeoma is a writer who most of us will recognize from So You Want to Talk About Race, topping the charts, #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. So congratulations is in order for both of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In addition to being artists, you're both community leaders, activists, and fundraisers. You've started the Seattle Artist Relief Fund, and on July 19th, there's going to be a virtual benefit for it. Refill is a live stream benefit that will be donating 100% of the money raised to the Seattle Artist Relief Fund, which is so exciting. Before we talk about the fund and the benefit, I'm first curious about how the world brought you two and your mutual passion for arts and community together. Can you tell us a bit about how you came to join forces, personally, but also in community organizing?
Yeah, well, I mean...
I was making music
Don't look at me like this.
I was making music with her brother, Oluo.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, like 15
So
years
the first
ago.
time I ever saw Gabriel was on stage with my brother, Oluo, in 2007. And I was actually pregnant with my now 12-year-old. And I just immediately thought he was awesome. And then, followed him on MySpace back in the day.
Hey, yes.
And then Facebook. And then we were brought together 2014 for an art project that was coming to you on the boards. And what was the name of that project?
That project was it was Complex Movements. It was Invincible from Detroit with Wajid, Sage Crump, a bunch of incredible organizers in Detroit who were doing this installation on the boards. In every city that they bring Complex Movements to, they're very intentional about building with community organizers in the places where they are. So before they even did the On the Boards presentation, the pod, the show, they brought a bunch of community leaders together, organizers and folks that they knew, to be in deep conversation with them. And that's how I finally met Ijeoma. And I didn't know she was a Ham's brother.
No, and I took it very personally. But this goofball was running around like just being like this ray of sunshine, playing tag. And then we had dinner and they sat him right across from me. And I immediately wanted to spend more time with this person who did not seem to understand I wanted to spend more time with him. And I spent 5 years convincing him to spend more time with me. And then finally,
you make it sound like it was one way.
It was one way.
It wasn't one way.
I mean, he didn't hate me.
I was flirting the whole time.
Yeah, he was, and then just disappearing for months at a time. We could talk about this forever, but we won't because that's not the point at hand. Anyways, we became close friends, and then we traveled together to Sweden on a whim, and in the middle of winter. And
that was her idea.
It was my idea.
It was a good idea.
I wanted to go to Sweden, and before I settled down to really finish writing my book, and we fell in love. And it was just a long-term friendship, long time building up to it, and it was perfect. I always said I wanted to end up with somebody who would be more likely to burn things down than me, and I found that person. And we've been a great team ever since. And so, music, art, writing, it's a huge part of our lives. It's, of course, you've been making amazing music for over 20 years, but also you're an amazing writer. And, writing has always been a part of my life. My mom was also a classical singer. My brother, Oluo, is, of course, a pretty well-known musician as well. And so we've this little house filled with art and love, and it's how we raise the family, and the rest is history. And so the project itself, as far as the Seattle Artist Relief Fund, really came from looking at, having been working artists for a while now, you don't get into it because you want to be rich. Most people don't, right? And if you do, you learn quickly that that's not what's going to come from it. When this pandemic hit, we were lucky to be in a situation where we had some savings, which I think is rare for many artists, for many working artists, but also rare in our lives. It's very recently that that's been the case. So as we were talking financially, my work as a speaker disappeared immediately. Before March hit, I had lost 3 months worth of work. And I remember looking at this and saying, talking to Gabriel and saying, thank God we can get through this. But at the same time, he was actually here in his studio looking at posts from friends of his who were saying, the gigs that I used to pay rent have just been canceled. Yeah. And we realized this was going to hit our community, especially because we so rely on the public. We rely on public events, on teaching, on, even retail crafters rely on events and storefronts.
And gig workers don't get unemployment.
Exactly.
Don't get insurance. Know what I mean?
And the gig workers who work at restaurants to supplement their income, that was going to be gone as well. Yeah. And I knew that, I have a really large following online, a huge community online, and they've been mobilized in the past to help people in need. And I called my assistant, Ebony Aruga, who's also an arts administrator, and said, hey, you don't have a lot to do right now since we have no work. Do you want to help me organize this? So she was excited, jumped right on it. And over the weekend, we put together a little GoFundMe, and our goal was $20,000. And by the end of the week, we had $100,000. And then we realized we did not know how to quickly distribute that amount of money to that many people.
It should also be noted that as fast as the money came in, the requests came in even faster.
Yes.
And as much money as we've raised, it's still like the requests are much higher than the money we've been able to raise.
Exactly. And so once we realized that we didn't have a system to really quickly distribute it, I mean, PayPal immediately shut us down. It was like, what are you doing? Why are you sending out this money? Tim Lennon and the rest of the amazing crew at Langston stepped forward.
Heroes.
Right.
Absolute heroes. Tim started, I think, handwriting checks for the first couple of days and walking them to the mailbox, and then built a whole system to get these funds out the door. They've been amazing administrators of this fund ever since. And so far we are just now at about $700,000 sent out directly to Seattle artists. The moment the money comes in, every week we're sending payments out. So we are not holding on to a penny of that money longer than a week. And it's all going directly to Seattle artists, thousands of Seattle artists across the Seattle area, and
across like every medium of art too.
Yeah, every medium of art. Just trying to keep people going, and that's really been our goal. These are small amounts of funds. It's really just what's getting people to get one bill paid, get groceries, or get those meds that they couldn't afford to pick up.
Pay rent 1 month.
Yeah, maybe pay rent for a month. It's Seattle, so maybe not pay all of your rent for the month, but and we wish it could be more, and we still have hundreds of people who need help, and our goal is to try to help everyone who's applied.
Every single one.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. $700,000 is not a small amount of money, especially during a time when the economy was essentially in a standstill. And I feel like the prevailing narrative was like, oh, people don't want to give, but then the need was immediate and people showed up, and even, people started fundraisers, people started grocery pickups and community kitchens. It's like the concept of mutual aid is not new, but people really took to it, and people were eager to share their resources, and in a way that I think surprised many folks. It's not a new concept at all. But why do you think that people took so readily to it during COVID-19?
Man, it was just such a crisis, you know what I mean? And it just impacted everyone, just like across the board. And I feel like when everyone's in the same situation, everyone steps up to help each other in a different way. You know what I mean? Like, that's the best way I can say it.
I think I definitely saw a pattern too in who was reaching out. What I saw often was it was people who are used to struggle.
Yeah.
Our arts community, some of the main funders of this artist relief fund are other artists, where I'm like, you may well be needing to apply in a month for this. People of color, communities of color really coming forward. I think people who are used to recognizing the value of mutual aid, who have depended on themselves, who are used to backing it up, all kind of came together. Because on the opposite, we're also seeing that a lot of large orgs, a lot of large foundations were either caught up in red tape or started to look at their own stock portfolios and say, oh, let's hold on to money, in a way that was really disturbing. And so this really is, you know, when we look at the thousands of donors who've poured money into this fund, it really is a community effort of people who say, you know what, we know that we're stronger together. We know that everyone is helped, that we all get through this together, or we don't get through this at all. And it's been beautiful to see. But, you know, I recognize the faces. You know, I look at the names of the donors. I know who these people are. When we look at the community kitchens, we know who these people are, because they're people who've always stepped up for community. It's just, you know, they're doubling their efforts right now. And it's been beautiful to see. And it's something that I hope other organizations will take note of, you know, and say, look, there is a quicker way. I'm so proud of what we've done, but in some ways, it's also really embarrassing that we are the largest funder of independent artists in Seattle right now, because there really should be millions of dollars flowing into independent artists to keep them afloat. We are now over 3 months into this crisis. And when you look at it that way, and you look at how many thousands of artists are impacted, $700,000 doesn't seem that big. And it's because we don't have the structural support. And so I really hope that, you know, we take this opportunity to say there's obviously a faster way to get money directly to the people, as shown by efforts like ours and so many other mutual aid efforts. It's a more efficient way. What can we do with the status quo that gets billions of dollars in funding to make it operate a little bit more like these mutual aid efforts?
Yeah.
Right, totally. Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to Gabriel a little bit ago about the success of the fundraiser so far. And I remember you saying it's really about trust, you know, trust that people are asking for what they need, and trust that they're giving back when they can. And it feels like that trust is also kind of this inherent quality of communities of color as well. And I remember watching the brunch that both of you did with Hollis, and Gabriel, you shared a spoken word piece, which was so good. And I saw that it made it into the record when you said, nobody's going to save us but us, to anyone who struggle that exists, right? We can take the weight of the world if we all lift.
Hey, you remember the lyrics.
It's
That's
so
dope.
good. It's so good. It gave me chills when I heard it. And, you know, like that notion of collective power, collective ownership, right? Like, it honestly reminded me a lot of growing up in a community of color, you know, like I'm a first-gen Vietnamese American raised by 2 generations of strong women, my mom and my grandma. And for a lot of Vietnamese Americans, you know, community isn't really an option. It's just, it's a given. It's a way of life. And a lot of times it's just a matter of survival. You know, it's as much our cultural lifeblood as fish sauce and rice, honestly, you know? And of course, like, communities of color are all different, 100%. But I do wonder, like, what role has that philosophy is, you know, we look after our own, what role has that played in your lives, both personally and seems like very much in your community organizing too?
It's everything for me. Like I've grown up as, you know, a hip hop raised high school dropout that teaches college, that is completely been self-employed until I got a job at KEXP. And I roll with like an entire community of people that have similarly like lived their lives outside of the conventions of the norm. And when you live like that for so long, when you're at the bottom for so long, like there was years, like, you know, I've talked about it in my music, there's years where I was homeless, you know what I mean? And the only way I knew everyone around me was eating was if we were feeding each other, you know, that idea of no one's gonna look out for us unless we are. No one's gonna come to help us. No one cares. You know what I mean? So we have to care for each other. And the more we do that, and the more we build community, and we can survive and we can overcome anything. You know what I mean? So it's absolutely been core foundation for the way I approach life. You know, not just organizing. And I feel like it's a really liberating thought too. Like it's not like this is not a woe is me sad kind of thought. It's a very empowering thing to know that there's no savior coming for you and we have to do it ourselves. and we can, and we have forever. You know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that spirit of community empowerment is I see that throughout your fund, 100%. And I also see that kind of reflected in this greater socio-political movement for racial justice for Black lives right now. I mean, there are intersections there. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's, we started this as Black artists and, working also with Langston, which is a center dedicated to Black excellence in the arts.
Yes.
With, based on the fundamental knowledge that Black lives matter, right? And that our communities matter and that we deserve not only to survive, but to thrive. And I think that sacrifice that we put forth to each other, seeing Black people giving money, knowing that they don't have money to give, but knowing that, they know that it benefits them. I think we're seeing similar behavior even in the protests, right? We are seeing Black people and people of all races out there risking their health to fight for Black lives. And it's that fundamental idea that we aren't healthy if everyone isn't healthy. We aren't strong if we're not holding each other up. And it really matters. We have to, the only way we can make progress is together. And I think that even what we're seeing right now, even some of these small beginning steps towards fundamental change in different cities around the country, is because of the way that we've come together and the way that we've said, you know what, we're all going to sacrifice together. We're all going to show up in these streets together. We're all going to donate, petition, do whatever we can together to try to make real change. And I think that everything that we can do to say that we matter, everything we can do to support our communities, to keep our communities strong, is not only beautiful, it's not only important, it's also protest, right? It also goes against the notion of a hyper-capitalist society that says you do well or you do poorly on your own, right? And that if you fail by yourself. If you win by yourself. And what we're saying is, no, we either fail because we didn't come together or we win together. And, that's what this fund is about. It's about, it's not just about the material safety of, our communities. It's also about letting, our creators, and we have specifically focused on, creators of color to make sure that they are represented in our funding, to make sure that they know that this funding is available to them. We've spent a lot of outreach in communities of color to make sure that they also just know that they're a part of the community. And then we hear back from people, just the other day, yesterday, actually, another recipient got money and tagged us in a post just saying, that it's not even about the money. It's about knowing that they were considered a valued member of the community, that they weren't forgotten. And I think that, as Black people, we know what it feels like to feel forgotten, but we also know how life-giving it is to know you're part of a community. And I think that our fundraiser, these protests, I think that what we're doing is we're reminding the world that they can't forget us and that we haven't forgotten us and that we are a community and that we are so much stronger than these systems that want to keep us apart.
Another thing I want to add to that, just a really obvious overlap to me is the call to defund the police that comes from abolition movements, which are largely led by Black feminist thought, that come from the fact that the police are not going to save us. The police are not here to protect us, so we have to protect ourselves. So what does investing in community look like to keep our community safe? Like to me, that's also mutual aid.
I love that idea of personal mentality and philosophy as its own form of protest. Back to community empowerment, though, I've heard that sentiment a lot in demands made by organizers like Nikita Oliver. I read this great tweet the other day by Clipping, and they said something to the effect of, A society whose entire sense of normalcy has been destroyed by a pandemic is a society that's able to dismantle every oppressive system that it's subject to. I thought that was so well worded, and it's true. You know, your fund helps artists who are struggling, but it also serves as a really good reminder that communities can and are showing up for themselves right now. Just like you said earlier, Gabriel, you know, like we have the power to do it ourselves, and we're creating new systems that focus on community because we've had to, and they work, which is amazing. You call out artists of color in your GoFundMe description, noting that even before COVID, artists of color were particularly under financial pressure. We've been having conversations at KEXP, of course, about how communities of color are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and the arts are no exception. And I'm reminded of an interview I saw with you, Ijeoma, where you talked about how Black people simply aren't believed in medicine when they seek medical attention, and oftentimes they're dismissed even if they have a life-threatening illness. And unfortunately, we've seen that racialized systemic discrimination in medicine show up with COVID-19 as well, with folks from the Black community dying at, I think, twice the rate of those in white communities. Can you speak to that disparity at all, specifically about how the Seattle Artist Relief Fund is hoping to support communities of color and artists of color?
I mean, one of the things that we definitely saw when we were hearing from people is they are cutting down on medications, right? The preventative care that keeps you healthy, they can't afford, right? And it shouldn't be as expensive as it is to stay healthy. Mm-hmm. But, you know, at a time where right now, even being sick, going into hospitals, going into public puts you at increased risk, it becomes even more dangerous. So, you know, trying to do what we can to help people make those decisions to take care of their health, to the best of their ability to get those medications, you know, is helpful. But it's also important to recognize too that what we see with this fund is that it's often the only funding that people are being approved for, especially for artists. And what that means is that all the other ways in which people are oftentimes helped to bridge gaps that would help keep them healthy, right? And also keep their stress levels low. When we talk about the impact that systemic racism has on health, we need to talk about mental and physical health, of just the impacts of constantly dealing with racist aggression and unsafety. And, you know, trying to provide a little safety, trying to provide that sense that community is here for you, trying to ease the burdens that people have and make these decisions a little less fraught is what we're trying to do, you know. And also, I think the general trust, you know, Black people are not trusted by our medical system. And we aren't handing out money and saying, you must use it for this. We are giving money to people and saying, we know that you know what's best for you.
Exactly.
And do what you will, you know, do what you need to do. Because we have to start trusting Black people. We have to start trusting communities of color. If anything, we are the people that everyone should be looking to in this time of crisis, because we have survived genocide after genocide after genocide, crisis after crisis. We have pulled each other through with nothing more than will, love, and ingenuity, you know, and we will pull through this, and hopefully all of us pull through this. And unfortunately, that won't be the case, but we have to fight, you know, for everyone. And it really does start with knowing that we have the instinct to do what we need to do, provided we have the resources to.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us thought that the pandemic would only last a few months, right? But of course, we've severely underestimated the power of COVID-19 and probably people's ability to wear a mask too. But what are your long-term plans now that the reality of COVID is extending into the future? You know, what happens once you do hit that $1 million mark?
That's the biggest question that we're asking right now. Yeah. Every time that the team of us get together and have a call, we're like, all right, one of these, once we hit this goal, you know, we're going to have to start talking about what's next, because the truth is that these stopgap measures don't last forever. This is an emergency fund for an emergency that's been going on for hundreds of years. Yeah. And what we really need to do is to start looking at what prevents this from happening, right? And what shores up communities, what protects artists from widespread cancellations, what builds a safety net. And that means that we're going to have to start looking at different partnerships right now to really get through this crisis that is turning into a long-term crisis. We are going to be the last industry to recover from this, because it's going to be a long time before we have widespread, healthy events for artists to teach at, to work at, to perform at, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to start looking at, what does long-term care, what does it look like as a city, as a region, to invest in the arts as if they are a necessary resource for the city, not something you do for fun, not a thing that's cool to have, but a reason why Seattle is Seattle.
Yeah.
And this city has the money. This city has shown it can invest in what it believes in and what it deems necessary.
Yeah.
So we need to start having a conversation about whether or not we deem the arts necessary and vital to this city. And I think it's vital. I think that part of the reason why so many people are here in this city is because of the arts. I think that part of what makes this city so appealing are the arts. Part of our culture, our morality, huge part of our morality comes from the arts. Mm-hmm. I don't think that we would be a place that we would want to be in if we didn't have the arts. And so now we have to start looking at, what does it mean to act accordingly as a city?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Refill is coming up on July 19th, and I know you have a goal of $25,000, which I'm sure folks will happily raise. But thank you so much for taking the time to join me to talk about why this is so necessary and why it will continue to be necessary into the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. So Refill is July 19th, starting at 4 p.m. PT on the KEXP YouTube channel. You're going to see performances from Sango, Left at London, Chong the Nomad, so many other artists. And the best part is that 100% of your donations are going to artists who need it through the Seattle Artist Relief Fund. So we have to come together to keep Seattle's artist community vibrant and to keep it diverse. And we can't do it without each other. So thank you again for watching, and thank you again for joining me. Get more info on Refill at kexp.org, and we'll see you on July 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you.